Welcome to this edition of Grassroots Advocacy. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. We're really excited to have you with us. During our last episode, we looked at a definition of advocacy. We looked at what it takes to be an advocate. We looked at how very important it is for each of us to speak up, especially for those whose voices have been marginalized. In this episode, we're going to spend some time looking at the essential building blocks for being an effective advocate. Those building blocks are passion, be, know, and do. So let's start off with passion. One of my all-time favorite movies is Robin Hood, and one of my very special favorite versions of Robin Hood is the one that starred Kevin Costner and Morgan Freeman. In that movie, one of the things that really stands out to me is a line of dialogue that Robin Hood had. And that dialogue went, "I have seen 10 men fight harder than 100 paid soldiers." Now, I think it was probably the fourth or fifth time that I watched that movie that I really started to get a sense of what Robin Hood was talking about there. And what he was talking about is that the passion and the conviction of those 10 noble folks drove them or motivated them to fight harder than 100 paid soldiers. And so I think it's really valuable for us to look at that, what motivates us, our passion, our conviction, what drives us to be very successful. So I would like to ask you to think about this. What is the source of your passion? What gets your juices flowing? Either in a very positive and constructive way, gets you excited, pumped up, and enthusiastic, or causes you maybe to become angry or frustrated or disappointed. I'd also like to ask you to think about the fact that oftentimes our passion is based on our conviction, our strongly held beliefs and norms. And so for me, as an example, one of the things that I'm very convicted about or have a great deal of conviction about is the importance of treating people as you wish to be treated. And certainly I hope in my own life I live that. So sometimes when I see that a person is not being treated in a way that I wish to be treated myself, it causes me to take action, either to try to address that wrong or to try to correct that so that it doesn't happen again in the future. So when we think about that conviction that gets us started, that gets our blood pumping, for many of you who serve in the post-acute and long-term care environment, I feel that it's likely that you probably have the conviction, the belief that the men and women that reside and receive care in aging services deserve the very best we have to offer, because you, like myself, believe that all of the gifts, all of the blessings, all of the wonderful things that we experience come from them. So it's really essential for you as an advocate to be passionate about what you believe in and to live that passion on a daily basis. So let's now then move from the discussion of passion to the discussion of be. When we're talking about be, we're really talking about the essence of the example that you set on a daily basis. It's really important for you to think about being the change that you want to see in our profession, in long-term care, in society at large. What does that change look like? And are you representing that? So I kind of think of it this way. When I was a youngster, Michael Jackson was really popular. And one of his big songs was "The Man in the Mirror." And it really is a good message because it makes us think, what example am I setting? How do I look? How do I project myself? How do people perceive me? And so it's really valuable to think about that and come up with a mental picture of what you want to look like and what you want the future to look like, and then demonstrate that on a daily basis. So it's also valuable for us to think about being the kind of person who sets the example, who does the right thing, the person who is a do as I do leader. And that's really important because it gives you a great deal of credibility. It gives you a great puts you in a great position of power because you're not asking folks to do something that you yourself aren't willing to do. The third thing I'd like you to think about when it comes to being a B as it relates to B is be the best you can be. Be an inspirational leader. It's very easy to sit in the break room and be part of the BMW club, and I'm talking about blaming, moaning, and whining. Doesn't take a professional to do that. However, it's very helpful to look at that situation and create an inspiration. For example, let's say that you experience frustration because not all of your peers knock on the doors of the elders before they enter the room. And that's not a really great representation of respect. It's not a really great representation of privacy and dignity and things of that nature. So it's easy to see why that might not be a great choice. So maybe what we can do as advocates for our elders in this particular example is we can say, hey, look, I really know that our residents will feel much more comfortable, or our patients will feel much more comfortable when we respect and acknowledge their right to privacy and dignity. So let's always make sure that we're knocking on that door, because that's how that we start to show the men and women that we care for that we do in fact care. So we've looked at passion, we've looked at B, and now let's transition to know. So it's very important to be knowledgeable with regard to the things that you're talking about. And so the first thing when we talk about know, please take the time to get to know each of the men and women that you care for. Get to know their preferences. If you have the opportunity, review their social history and their dietary history. Review the documents that were provided during the admissions process, so that review the care plan, so that you have some understanding of what the needs and wants and preferences of each unique individual are. The next thing when we think about the know piece is it's important to know the federal and state regulations. And it's important to know those regulations because they create a framework or a set of rules for us to operate in, so that we move closer to achieving quality, at least from a regulatory perspective. And so taking the time to get to know those new regulations, and yes, they are new. So in 1987, President Ronald Reagan signed into law the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1987. Recently, we implemented the new regulations as conditions of participation. So it's important to be aware of those regulations and how they affect you. It's also important to realize that states may add to a regulation that's been created by the federal government from the Department of Health and Human Services through the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. And so how that's applied at the state level, there may be some additional information. So you want to take the time to get to know your state regulations as well. For example, the federal regulation might say something like each individual will be provided 3 meals and 2 snacks in a 24-hour period. So that's how the language might seem from the federal level. At the state level, it may say that each elder is provided 3 meals and 2 snacks within a 24-hour period based on their preferences and their desires, or at a time that's convenient to them. So it's important to be able to see those connections. Then we also want to know our organization's policies and procedures. Your leaders, administrators, directors of nursing services, in some cases, corporate folks, sat down and wrote policies and procedures, not because they loved to sit down and write all day long, but because they wanted to provide information in black and white to help us achieve success based on how the organization defines that. So take the opportunity to sit down and get to know those regulations, those policies and procedures, and do it in a way that's meaningful for you. When I very first entered long-term care for my very first orientation, I was sat in a room with a 3-inch, 3-ring binder that was the organization's policies and procedures. The lady who was handling our orientation said, "Jeff, you have 3 hours to read this. When you get done, I'll come back, have you sign the statement saying that you read and understand the policies and procedures." Well, I don't know about you, but I did not graduate from the Evelyn Wood Speed Reading School. So when I signed that document at the end of the day, it wasn't completely accurate. I did skim through the policies and procedures, but I couldn't say I necessarily understood them completely. So you want to be aware of you want to know the policies and procedures of your organization. It positions you to more effectively speak on behalf of your residents, your peers, your profession. So get to know those things. When we talk about know, it's also important to know about the organization's culture and how that relates to what's happening with the care that you're providing. So take the opportunity to know those basic pieces of information, and it will help you to be much stronger in the long run. Now then, so we've looked at passion, we looked at be, we looked at know, and now it's appropriate for us to look at do. And so do one thing each day that moves you closer to the desired long-term care environment that you wish to see. So you may do something like making sure that you are positively reinforcing your peers who are delivering great care. Or you might want to purposefully demonstrate for folks the right way to listen to the men and women as you're providing care, because it's important, because it's essential to the communication process. So you want to do that. You also want to set the right example by doing all of the things, not necessarily perfect, because perfect may not necessarily be a realistic expectation. But I assure you, if you do the best you can do from day to day to day, you will be a rock star, and you will move closer to that desired perfect state. I also want to encourage you to, when you're thinking about what I'm doing, I also want to encourage you to do the things that you believe best enhance your voice for the people that you care for. And so some days that might be going on Google and doing a search that says, "Help me understand public speaking." Sometimes it might be doing some study on how to write more clearly and effectively. Goodness knows, we can all use some improvement in that area. So it's really helpful for us to think about the passion that we bring to the table, the be, the know, and the do. And when we work with those essential elements or building blocks, we will move closer to becoming the most effective grassroots advocate that we can possibly be. So for our next segment, we will build on the ideas of be, know, and do by really moving into some discussion about how we effectively communicate our passion and our vision for the people we care for. So as we conclude for today, keep in mind your passion is powerful. Be the best person you can be. Know what you need to know to speak accurately and effectively, and do your very best. And if you put those four blocks together, you will be well ahead of the power curve. As we conclude for the day, let's please think about this quote from Michael Milk, or pardon me, Harvey Milk. Okay, had a senior moment there. Was thinking about something else. Actually, I was thinking about M&Ms because I really love them. But let's consider this quote as we conclude for today. I know you can't live on hope, not hope alone, but without hope, life isn't worth living. So you and you and you, give them hope. Give them hope. You have the opportunity to serve, to create hope for the men and women you care for, and for your profession, and for long-term care. So give them hope. I look forward to seeing you during our next episode.